Hey guys and girls, how you going? Mark Hummer here of course, and today I'd like to talk to you a bit of camera gear, particularly Nikon accessories. We've had a few new releases very recently, so we've got a lot to talk about, and I've actually got a new purchase which I'd like to discuss with you. Now the new purchase, as you can see sitting on the bench just here, is the new battery grip. And I've got a battery grip for my Z7 Mark II. And the reason I've got the grip, it's multiple reasons. One is, look, I've always wanted to know what it feels like to have a grip, and if it's all it's cracked up to be, if it's going to be as comfortable and user-friendly as it's recommended that it is. And also there's the factor of, with the new Z9 coming out, it would be a little bit crazy for me to spend $9,000 Australian on this brand new camera that has a permanent battery grip fixed into it, only to find that I actually found that whole thing a miserable experience to use, uncomfortable and too bulky in the camera bag. So of course, before you make massive investments on something you've maybe not used before, it's always good to try something else out that's very similar, so you know if the feel and the comfort is good for you. So that's why I bought the battery grip. Now there are other advantages to the battery grip other than sampling out whether you want a Z9. Some of the other advantages is, of course, you've got now two batteries, so you've got a longer battery life, and you've got a more comfortable hold for your portrait photography. So all in all, there are advantages to having it, and I have always wanted to have one and try it out. And the beauty of buying this individual battery grip that attaches to your Z cameras is, of course, now I can detach it. So if I find there's scenarios where I don't want it and it is a nuisance, I can quickly remove it. And when I want it on, it's there and available, but I'm not committed to having to use it all the time, which is something you have to do with something like the old DSLR D6 and D5, etc., and also the Z9, because it's a permanent feature on the camera. So I've tried it out as a sample very recently, and I've had a lot of fun with it. And yes, it is very comfortable. I mean, when you're taking photos with this thing now, and I'm taking my shots and I want to turn it sideways, it's so much more comfortable to have my hand in a position such as this, where I'm supporting the lens or the camera body, and I can now take photos just using my buttons as the normal configuration. It's very comfortable. So you turn it around here, you'll be able to see that it's quite comfortable. You have your wheel and your little scrolling buttons, and everything's very comfortable to use. Now, the advantage of that is, of course, when you're taking portrait photography. So your hands are in a very set, fixed, normal position when you're taking shots. The other advantage of this is you don't look like some crazy monkey. And the problem with the conventional way of taking a photo in a portrait mode is you turn the camera like this, and you'd have your arm up like that. And you can see how your arm's like really up to your head there, and it's a bit contorted. It's not a great look for a start, but also it can be quite uncomfortable. So having your arm and elbow down now when you're taking the photos in that mode, well, obviously it looks better and it's more comfortable for yourself. It's not really a vanity thing, but you don't need to make yourself look any more ridiculous than you have to. And having your arm up like that all the time, it does look a bit odd, doesn't it? So as far as its form and function goes, I really like the unit. I think it's a beautiful looking unit. It's very professionally put together and looks fantastic, and it feels very good in the hand. It's very comfortable. The rubberized grips that they provide, for example, are textured, matches the rest of the camera, and its general profile and feel in the hand is very good. So I've got no real complaints with the quality of the build or its functionality. Now, of course, if you want to, you can take the batteries out very simply. You can either press the yellow button down and just hot change the batteries, so the A battery is always going, and this is like the B battery, or the other way around, sorry, the B battery is always staying in and operational and full, and then that means that when you take the battery out, the camera is still running. So if you're doing video, for example, with it, then it's continually running, and by swapping the batteries for a fresh one, then that gives you an opportunity of never running out of battery life, and of course also it doesn't turn the camera off, so you're not interrupting your video shooting. Then when you want to take it back in, put a new fresh battery in, and there you go. Now, of course, this only works if you've got a few spare batteries. And of course, as you can see here, I've got 4 other batteries in my hands here. Of course, there's 2 in the camera, and then I've got 1 in the camera I'm shooting now. So I have multiple spare batteries. Now, ultimately, that was never an issue for me, battery life, because as I say, I have multiple batteries anyway, so it was not a big deal. And then, of course, I also have this other pack as well for when it comes to battery power, and this is a independent battery block with a USB-C cable, and when I connect these up, I'm able to run this camera for about 2 days straight. This is worth about almost 10 of the conventional Nikon batteries in strength and length of use. So battery power indefinitely was never an issue. If I plug this into the camera and put it in a little sack under the tripod, then I had battery power all weekend, so I didn't really care about the battery power length. But of course, just the fact that I don't have to think about it here, and for the average day's photo shoot now, knowing I've got 2 batteries connected and they're fully charged and it's going to run all day, well, that's very convenient. And even if the batteries start to get a bit low, I can change them in a second. It's a very quick operation. So yay on Nikon. You know, I think they've done a very good job of this unit, and I'm very pleased. So I'll be putting up some footage. You'll see some little slider videos I've done, close-ups of how it looks and operates. So I'm quite pleased with it, as I say. So I'm liking the idea. I found that it was definitely worth I think it cost me like $500 Australian. And so I'm very happy with that purchase. I've got it on eBay. It's a brand new unit. And all in all, it's very good, and I'm very pleased with it. I'd highly recommend it, is really what I'm saying. So in functionality though, how does it operate when you're putting lenses on? Well, let's have a look here. I've got a multitude of lenses here. One of the most common lenses I suppose anybody would want to use for doing portraits is the 70-200. So let us just put that on and we'll have a look how it all looks and feels. So here you have it now. I've got it on and connected, and you're sort of getting a rough idea of what it's looking like and how proportions are. So it's quite a big heavy lens, of course, and when you're taking portrait photos now, it's very convenient to change your hand position from up here. You get a nice grip. I mean, you can hold the whole camera up on that grip now if you wanted to. I always support a heavy lens on the collar if it has one. The collar just makes everything very fluid. So when you're turning it around and you're positioning it, you're not having to adjust this hand at all. This one stays in position. You just loosen off the collar knob a little bit so you have a rotation. And then, of course, you know, if you're doing your portraits, it's all very comfortable now. Just showing you from the other side. So where your hand grips here, you can see that it's very, very comfortable and operates very well. So there's your horizontal photos, hands in the same position. Now you're in your portrait mode and the hands are in the same position, and it's very, very good to use. If you're using this on a tripod, of course, at all, then the comfort factor isn't really relevant, but it's, again, with the collar system, it's very easy to rotate it around and use it, and it's really not much of an obstacle or intrusion at all, and the extra battery life is always a benefit. So that's the 70-200 there and what it looks like on there. We'll just swap it over, and I will say that if you look at the collar here, you can see that the collar isn't really intruding. You couldn't grip it with the collar down, but of course all you have to do is rotate the collar up then, and then you've got the full use of the grip. So if you're wondering, oh, is the collar in the way when you're shooting? Well, you can always move the collar out of the way should you need to. So that's just an option for you to make that choice. And of course you can always remove the collar completely as well if you'd wish to. So that's something like a big lens like that, a 70-200. Excuse me, just make all these things safe. And then we can use another example. We use the 50. I've got a 50mm here. There we go. Make sure it's clicked on nice and tight. So this is the 50mm 1.2. So this is an excellent example of a quality prime lens. So it's a nice heavy lens. It's still quite weighty, but on this unit here, as you can see, you've got plenty of room for finger grip. There's no issue with that at all. And when you're putting it into the mode for portrait photography, it's quite comfortable. And all your grip buttons are exactly where you want them, and it feels very good in the hand. Now, of course, a lens like this, I would be resting my hand on the actual focus barrel here, and that could be creating a problem. You might think, oh no, well, if you're holding it on there and you're moving the camera here and there, you can change focus all the time and ruin your settings. Well, so what I do is I just go into the menu setting and I deactivate the manual focus arrangement on all my lenses. So in the menu setting there, you can go in, deactivate the focus manually, and it only does autofocus. So now it doesn't matter how much I rotate that focus button, it's never going to activate or change anything anyway. So yes, it does tend to override if you allow it to, but you can of course turn that function off. I mean, let's face it, let's be honest with each other here. How many times now do you actually need to manually focus? I'd say almost none. There's a few examples where I would be doing, say, macro photography, and in that scenario of macro, you might definitely need to pinpoint exactly that part of a ring or an insect or something, and if the insect's maybe moving very slightly, you've got to do the sort of micro adjustment, and that way you don't want to necessarily rely on an autofocus perhaps, but that's a very rare occasion. So as I say, I don't use manual focus anymore. Those days are gone for me. It's all relying on the good quality Nikon autofocus. So I deactivate the autofocus in the menu. So that's what I do there, and that way of course I can support the lens and I don't have to worry about moving the barrel and it interfering. But the comfort factor of this is very good. Of course the camera weighs a little bit more, so it shifts the balance in your favor. So when you've got a big heavy lens, as this one is, it's quite a weighty lens, it's over 1 kilo of weight, with the battery grip it does tend to favor a balance in your hand more, and of course with more grip power that makes it also more comfortable to hold. So far I'm finding this MB-N11 battery grip very excellent and well worth the purchase, but I do love the fact that I can remove it should I have to. And how hard is it to remove it? Well, on the back of the camera here you'll see there's a little wheel, and on this wheel, on that MB unit, all you have to do is undo that little screw, a few rotations, and out she comes, and she's off. And as you can see here, there's a little battery slot in here, and of course the little activators, you'll see the little pins there, little gold pins, they go inside the camera, and there's a connection in here, and that activates everything, which is exactly why you can't use it on the Z7 I, because the Z7 I doesn't have the corresponding little pins inside the battery grip for it to function. So these things are only useful for the Z6 and Z7 II. Other than that, you can't use them. But again, like, you remove that, makes everything very comfortable. It has have a very intelligent little holder. So in this unit here, you hold your battery door in this system here. It just clips in, and that way you never lose it. So it's easy to get out, put it onto the camera if you're never going to use the battery grip, and you can again ply it here to keep it safe in storage. And then when you put it back in, it's all very tidy, and it is really just a question of tightening up that thumb screw, and nice and firm. Make sure it's firm so it never shakes loose, and also make sure that the pins get a good connection, and then you're back to having your battery grip. And as you saw, how long did that take to attach and reattach? Nothing more than a few seconds, was it? So it's certainly not a pain to use or a pain to remove. But just think about this, how do you remove it from your Z9? You can't, it's a permanent attachment. So I'm not bagging the Z9, it's a purpose-built pro-level body for professionals who need all the features. You are 100% all the time going to be applying those top-end autofocus features, the speed of operation, shutter speed for example. You need everything you can to make that work perfectly. So for a professional, the Z9's an excellent unit, and I understand that they would be fully prepared to wear the extra bulk and size of having a permanent battery grip. For me at the moment, however, I'm not really that excited about it. I'm more than happy to be able to detach it and have a light, very portable camera unit in my bag without the extra bulk if I don't particularly require it. So if I'm going to do some, let's say, I don't know, landscape photography, maybe some time lapse, or I'm just out on a festival doing some happy snaps and not taking everything too seriously, I can then have a nice, light, comfortable camera as well, and I've not had to have 2, 3, 4 cameras to make all this work. So I'm finding it good that it's removable. That's really where I'm coming from. So there I've just showed you the 50mm on it and what that looks like. There will be, of course, images coming up on the screen anyway to give you better detail so you can see everything close up. But another feature that people will talk about and ask is regarding, excuse me, I'll just settle that one there, is with the Ftc adapter. Now, of course, they do have a brand new Ftc adapter out now, the Ftc Mark II. This is, of course, the Ftc Mark I, which is the only one I have at the present. And the reason being is I don't have a lot of the old lenses, so I don't have the F-mount lenses very much. I only have one. So being I have only one, I just put up with it and may do for the odd times I use it. And this one lens that I do have is not really a portrait lens. This is more of something where I'm doing time lapse, or I'm doing steady cam work, or I'm using it for long exposure photos or something, and it's not requiring me to hold it and use a grip anyway. So can you use it with the Z9 or with the battery grip? Is it too little a gap and you can't really make any benefit? Well, let's try it together and see how we go. So there it is attached, it's locked in, and just showing you the functionality of that. You can actually see the dimensions and how it's looking. So actually there is a gap, and it is enough gap to get my hand in. So if I illustrate it here, you can see that my fingers are in there, and I'm finding that quite comfortable. You could hold that all day. You could use it in the portrait mode as well, there's no issue. The finger room is adequate and satisfactory. So you don't have to really upgrade to the Mark II version of the Ftc adapter, but you can. And of course, anytime you lose any lumps and bumps that are annoying to you, well, it's just going to make the whole experience a lot more comfortable. It's only relevant, of course, if you have a battery grip. If you're not having a battery grip, then the Ftc Mark I with that lump there makes no difference to you because you don't have a battery grip to be inconvenient. But if you do have the battery grip as as I have here, or a Z9, I'm recommending you get the Mark II version, only because it's going to make the whole experience so more comfortable. And let's face it, let's be honest, if we're going to spend $9,000 Australian on a new camera, and it has the battery grip, you can afford a couple of $100 for the Mark II Ftc adapter, can't you? I mean, you've got to be serious here. If you can't afford the Ftc2, then you can't afford the Z9. So I think that's a very, very relevant comment. So yes, is it practical? Can it be used? Yes, but it does just almost rub a little bit. And I've got, look, I haven't got hands like a gorilla. They're not particularly big. But if you're a big-handed person, big, thick fingers, then maybe you want to definitely upgrade to the Ftc2, just to guarantee that there is plenty of room and it's not a discomfort at all. But it can be used, the Mark I version. So I've sort of gone through most of the lenses there and their application. So what I'm going to do is move on to another subject. Right, so the other subject we're talking to still pertains to Z9, Z7 and such subjects as that, but just we're going a little different field now immediately. So what it is as far as the dimensions and size goes, and I think this is a relevant point, how much different is this Z9 and the Z7 II with the battery grip different in dimensions and weight? Well, I tell you, there's only about a 10% difference all round. When you put the battery grip on the Z7 II, the height is exactly the same as the Z9. There's no difference in that. There's a slight difference in the breadth of the camera body. It's probably about 1 centimetre wider, and in the depth part, it's probably 1 centimetre deeper. But really, this is only about a 10% increase in those dimensions. It's quite a modest difference. In fact, if you were just looking at them visually on the bench, you probably wouldn't notice any difference at all. But as far as in the hands, you might notice that it's a little bit thicker grip and a little bit broader. But it's not significant, and that's something I wanted to bring out. So when it comes to, is buying this sort of thing a relevant illustration of what the Z9 would feel like in the hand? Yes, it is. Those marginal, almost 10% differences in size and weight are not going to make anything significant to your experience as different. So that's one element. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about too was the whole strategy of the Z9 with the Z7 II. Have anybody noticed that well, as of yesterday, or I think it was, we had a Z7 II upgrade, firmware upgrade. Now I had to laugh when I saw the firmware upgrade because I've been waiting for this for like 6 months to have a decent autofocus upgrade. And what did they do? They disappointed us yet again. It was a minor incremental change. I think we went from version 1.3 to 1.4 or something like that. It was a very, very minor incremental change, and also what it did, it was just a specific change. So it was only if you're in the single point focus mode under low light conditions and these particular settings, then there was a minor improvement. It was like, well, who cares? So what? That was a pretty lame firmware upgrade. So I'm really hoping they come good on their promises of a decent firmware upgrade, so we're getting at least somewhere near the Z9's performance, because there is a lot of room for this to improve. It's not terrible camera, it does a good job in most facets, but it can be so much better. In fact, there's only so little difference to the Z7 I, the Z7 II, that it really wasn't hardly worth the upgrade. So hopefully the firmware will make it and justify it a lot better than it is at the moment. I thought that was a little bit insulting, really. So hopefully it might only be 6 weeks away or something and we get a major increase, maybe to a level 2.0 firmware upgrade, which should be a really good kick. The other thing is, I think the whole strategy, the Z9/Z7 II I wanted to talk about. You may notice that, of course, they want to sell the Z9. That's the latest thing they've brought out. They're really pushing it with marketing. They're spending a lot of money promoting it, and so they should. It's a great camera. So why wouldn't you promote the best you have? So obviously what they're doing, and this is, I'm saying obviously, but no inside information here, just my gut feeling and opinion, so please take it, there's nothing more than that. I'm seeing that what they're doing is they're on purposely holding back the Z7 II. They're not giving you the firmware upgrades yet to make it as good or better than it should be. The reason being is they don't want to sell more of these right now. They want to sell as many of the Z9s they're producing as they can to get their money back on that investment, and then in, say, 3 months maybe, I'm imagining, then they can cool it because they've got the pre-orders in, they've made the sales, they've got the production numbers up, and then they can start maybe reinvesting in the Z7 II and making the firmware upgrade better in that. They don't want to, I believe, they don't want to make this too good now. If they make this really, really good and a competitor to the Z9, then what's going to happen is no one's going to buy the Z9. They'll just buy the battery grip and the firmware upgrade, and for a couple of $100 they've got something almost as good. Now, will the Z7 II ever be as good as the Z9? No, No, it's not even going to be half as good as the Z9, and I'm never going to pretend it's going to be. But what you can do is you can make it good enough that you don't care. And that's the thing. If you're a professional, you're making your living with your photography, you're a sports action shooter or wildlife photographer, and that's where you make your dollars, then it doesn't matter how much the Z9 costs. You're going to buy it because that's what you want. You really want the best there is because that's your living. But for anyone who's not making a living on sports action or wildlife and maybe just does that as a hobby on the side of their portrait photography or their wedding photography, then the Z9 really, I don't know if it's worth it for you. So it's up to you whether you think it's worthwhile, the investment or not, but it is a lot of money for what I think in 90% of the cases is an incremental change to your situation. There's nothing wrong with the focusing ability and the eye detect in the Z7 II for any sort of like wedding photography or portrait photography. I don't think I've ever lost a shot with the Z7 II. The focusing on the eye is pretty good now. I use, of course, personally, I don't use a lot of eye detect at the moment. I'm using still by habit and force of habit. I think I use a lot of single point in choosing the focus point. I do like to rely on that because I can choose exactly where I'm focusing and I feel more confident. I think with a firmware upgrade or two, then I may have more confidence in the eye detect and using that all the time. But that's not going to happen right now for me. I like to be more in control. Maybe I'm a little bit of a control freak. But it works for me and I'm very happy with the camera at the moment. And with the battery grip now, I get all the benefits of that comfort and ability to take the portrait photos and the extra battery life on hand immediately. So that's pretty convenient. So I just thought I'd run you through that strategy where I think they're actually holding back the Z7 II at the moment until they make all the sales and really get a lot of pre-orders for the Z9. And so when they think they have a year's worth of pre-orders and the money in the bank from all that money, then they can start maybe refocusing on this. So just don't be too disappointed if we have to wait several months more for a decent firmware upgrade. I think that's only reasonable marketing on their point. It's disappointing for us because we're hanging out for it to be improved, so I empathise with your frustration. I'm feeling that pain as well, but at the same time it's still a usable camera in the interim and you can understand their marketing justification. The other thing I can talk about right now is the new release of some lenses. Now we've got the 400mm and that's very exciting. 400mm with the teleconverter at F2.8. What a brilliant combination. There was a few things I wasn't too sure about whether it was ever worth getting. One was, right, how much does it weigh? Because these lenses can weigh a ton. If it's got a built-in teleconverter, it's an F2.8. This thing could be a monster lens and it could weigh like 4 or 5 kilos. Fortunately, I'm happy to say no, it doesn't. The weight on it is actually very reasonable. We're looking at about, I think it is 2.8 kilos, which for a lens of its versatility and ability is really, really good. I had a 200 to 400 of the F-mount lenses, which is a brilliant lens, and that one weighed about 3.2 kilos, so that was a little bit heavier. And the thing about this new one that's very exciting is with a built-in teleconverter, it's just a flick of a button, and it's really quick. I've seen them use it. It's simply, you've got the lens on, you're at 400, you want to boost into 560, click, bang, you're in there. There's no adjustment, no taking your hands off the camera, no having to move your sight or your focus point or what you're concentrating on. You can just flick the button, bang, you're in. That's fantastic. What a way of punching into a photo. You lose one stop of light, of course, so you go from 2.8 to f4, but that's not really a big deal anyway. That previous lens I have was the 200 to 400 was an f4, and that was very, very bright at f4. So I don't think that's really an issue, loss of light. I did find it very exciting, and I did find interesting in print that you were able to use your teleconverters independently. So yes, it has a teleconverter inside it, a 1.4, but if you've got a, say a 2.0 teleconverter as I do, that means that you can deactivate the 1.4, put your 2x teleconverter on, and all of a sudden you've now boosted it all the way from 400. You can bypass the 5.6 and go with your 2x teleconverter to 800mm. Now 800mm is going to be something like f5.6, but that's actually very reasonable. When I use my 70 to 200 and I put my teleconverter on that my 2x, it's from a 2.8 to a 5.6, and I have no issue using that for wildlife photos. So the 5.6 issue, that's not an issue to me. You can always boost up your ISO a little bit or drop your shutter speed if that's possible, but I'd recommend maybe boosting the ISO before dropping your shutter speed, because shutter speed is really important when you're doing wildlife in action. So you know, it's a workaround, you can get around it, and I don't think 5.6 is disappointing at all. In fact, I think when the 800mm comes out, the specifically built 800mm Pro Level S line lens, I think that'll be a 800 5.6 anyway. So really you're getting 3 different lenses with that 400. So is it an expensive lens, the 400mm with the teleconverter coming out? Yes, it's really expensive. I believe it's something like in the ballpark of $20,000 Australian. Yeah, or about 15,000 US. So it's very expensive lens. The only way you can really justify it, of course, is that the quality is going to be, of course, excellent. It is quite lightweight for what it can do, so having that under 3 kilo weight is very handy for portability. It's not particularly enormous and big. Once you take the hood off, or you reverse the hood into the lens, it's actually a lot more compact than you'd believe. It's quite, you get it in most large camera bags. And then of course there's the advantage, you've got 3 different lenses. So you have a 400mm, you have a 560mm with a TC adapter, and then with your own 2.0 teleconverter, you've got 800mm. So you've actually got 3 lenses then, 400, 560 and 800mm. Wow. What other lens can you have all that versatility and still have razor sharp picture quality and uncompromising autofocus? That's extremely rare. So, you know, good on Nikon. They've done a brilliant job on that lens. Unfortunately, the price is deadly, but of course, if you're a professional, it doesn't matter. It's going to be tax deductible anyway, and that's how you earn your living. You've got to spend money to make money, and if that thing helps you make money, then I'm all for buying it. Am I going to get one tomorrow? Hell no. I don't have $20,000 just lying around to do nothing with. So, but one day I would love to dream of getting one. If I have a little windfall in some way, well, maybe I can invest in that. But I'm not going to splurge on that sort of money for something I use, you know, a couple of times a month as a hobby. But I just wanted to review it and just say I'm very impressed with the stats on it anyway. The hands-on feel, I think Jaron Pollard did a hands-on with it and he was very impressed with it. And there's been a few other Nikon representatives who have also done videos and they're all loving it. So I love the concept. And I think it's a brilliant lens put together, and yay on Nikon. Good for them that they built something so magnificent and they could be proud of it, as we can. So finally, just wrapping things up, I'd just like to talk about the actual room setting. Now, I'm always changing my room settings. You might not notice it terribly because it's always the Japanese Suji rice paper walls behind me and the little fans of colour, and you'll see my little lamps here in the corner. But there are always minor incremental changes going on because I'm trying out new things. Now, I did mention just recently that I changed some light bulbs in my lights there. I went from a standard incandescent light that was very yellow and I changed it to these LED lights here. Now, these little LED lights that screw in are magnificent. They give a lot of power, they're cool, and they don't take much electricity, so you can sort of leave them on all day and it's not really a burden in any way. But I did find that when I had this particular size, it was a bit too bright. They were really burning hot. So what I did is I've just gone down to a smaller size. So as you can see, it's exactly the same unit. The only difference is it's a smaller version of it. So we've gone down from like a 15 watt to a 7 watt. And that's what's in them now. So I bought 6 of these when I bought them, so I always have some. I can change them if they blow. They're unlikely to. LEDs do tend to last for nearly ever. But this time I've got a few of them, and I just want to show you that I've reduced the size of the light bulb on my little lamps here, and I found that that light setting is just about perfect. It's a gorgeous little ambient light when you have nothing on in the room and I just want to look at the computer, watch a video or something. It's very easy to just give a nice soft glow in the room. And when I'm doing my YouTube videos, it's a nice little distraction in the corner without it being overdone and really blowing out that corner. So I'm finding that's really cool. I love the little ambient light it gives on this bench, so that's very handy. The other thing you may have noticed, and I'll put some pictures up so you can see everything in wide angle, but I've also got a light behind me. So just up here, if I was to tap it, you can hear me tap it, you can see the reflection on my hand maybe, the golden glow. There's a golden light behind me, an 672 aperture Araman LED light behind me, and that's got an amber screen over the front of it to perform a nice golden glow. So that golden glow goes over my shoulder and projects as a backlighting onto the units on my bench here. And then of course you've got my main light, my big octo box in the front there to provide light directly on me with a grid on it, and just in front of me here, and it's just, I can hear me tapping it just there, and of course you see it in the pictures. I have a little ring light up there. That's a Falcon eyes ring light. It's a 400 LED light, and that's a brilliant little light for, you can change the color. So it has that amber to full white adjustability. I've got it on the amber setting at the moment to match the light behind, and that is glowing right down onto the bench now. So what does that do specifically? Well, it balances the lighting. So when I'm showing you an item here, I have light now coming directly down onto the objects. Then I have the light coming forward, so you're getting light that direction, and then of course I've got light behind me up in the top corner here, which is coming from behind. So we've got light coming from every direction, even a little light coming from these as well. So if you're wondering how I get things illuminated as I do, that's how I'm doing it. I've got multiple lights. You just don't get to see them all on the screen because they're sort of hidden away just out of sight. So I just sort of run you through that so you know what's going on. I will give you a few pictures also of a new rig. I made a rig up on my camera mount there. So you've got your hot shoe mount on top of the camera, just here. And what I've done is I've made a little bracket, and it's a little bendy bracket like this. And what it does enables me to mount the bracket here, however, have my monitor here, and have my sound receiver here, and that way I'm not having to have multiple things mounted all over and cages and brackets everywhere to mount accessories. I mount everything on this one top unit, and it just slides on quick and slides off the hot shoe very quickly, so that's sort of very convenient. The other thing I should mention to you is with the camera here, you'll see that I'm using a different eyepiece. Now why have I got a different eyepiece on? I've got the different eyepiece because the one I had previously was a beautiful soft silicone cup, and it was very oval, and it fitted the eye socket beautifully. So when you had the camera up to the eye, it was very comfortable to use. The downside of that was, and this is a manufacturing fault, and I hadn't realized, I kept trying to put flashes or flash triggers onto my hot shoe and was having a lot of trouble getting them on. It was like really a wriggle and jiggle and trying to force them in there, and I didn't know what was happening. What was happening is they had the mount too high on that unit. Now this one I've purchased here, which is a little bit more modest in size, but has a wonderful feature that when you add this on, it's very flush. So they've thought through the design a lot better. They made that flush, so now when I put a speed light or I put a trigger on, it just glides on and off very easily. I'll show you some pictures to illustrate what I'm talking about close up. But buying the right pieces of equipment for your camera, the right accessories, are so important. Because it makes the whole experience either joyful or miserable. And when you're trying to force something on in front of your clients, you look like an idiot. You look like you don't know what you're doing. And it wasn't that I didn't. It was that the manufacturer of the other eye cup hadn't thought it through properly and made the rise too high and was blocking the access to the hot shoe. So now with this new model one, I find it very comfortable to use, and at the same time, yes, it does block out the stray light when you're looking through the viewfinder, but I can get accessories on and off. So I'm just saying, when you're buying accessories, don't assume that everything's honky-dory and right. Sometimes they make them for a Nikon, but it's not someone who actually shoots with a Nikon, has never actually used it. It looks good on a drafting paper, but in practical application, it's a disaster. Speaking of accessories, let me show you this. You'll laugh when I show you this one. Sorry, just getting all the bits and pieces. Sorry, I just had to get all the bits and pieces in hand to show you. Now, what happened here is I have a lot of these items. Now these items here are a little mount for your light stands, and you can slot them in, screw them down, they clamp up on top and bottom. You have either a 1/4 or a 3/8 screw if you want to mount something in that fashion, but generally for a light stand they're a great little accessory for clamping down lights. But what I found is there's several manufacturers and several looks. Now as you may notice, this one here, for example, I have is a different color. So you have one here that's a little bit I don't know, it's a nickel sort of color, and that's more of a chrome, and that really means nothing. The color doesn't mean anything, but the material means something. And I've spoken about buying accessories before and getting things that actually are of a quality material. Now, I could not tell the difference between these. When you look at them, you cannot see which one is manufactured and which sort. Are they solid metal, machined on a CNC machine or something out of one piece of steel? Or is that multiple pieces of steel? Well, let me just show you something. I was using one the other day, and I gave it a bit of a jiggle, and the damn thing snapped in half. And I thought to myself, how in the hell do you snap in half a solid piece of steel? And then I realized they're not all solid pieces of steel. Some are, yes, and some are not. Some are cheaply pressed together bits and pieces. Have a look at this configuration in my hand here. Here we have 3 bits. One of these cheap little mods, one of these cheap little units here, you can't tell by looking, but the cheaper versions, as this one is, actually has a little ridge, and you think, what's that little ridge? These things are actually pressed in together. They're 3 pieces, and they press them in together to end up with this result. So you're thinking you've got something super strong to support your lights, and you're going to put your light maybe in this direction and have all the weight to the side, and you don't realize that what can happen is this thing can just come apart and snap. Now, it didn't actually break as such. What it did is it just come out of the socket. So there's a little hole in here, a little recess, and this fits in like a male-female plug. And it does at both ends. Both ends are the same. That is only pressed together. It's not welded together. It's not a permanent feature. I was shocked. I don't mind telling you how crap that was. That at any time my good camera gear could have just plunged to the ground and been destroyed because they made these cheap, crappy devices like that, and they don't tell you it's 3 pieces just pressed together. They say in the description, oh, it's metal. You know how many times I've read instructions that they say they're metal? And then I've asked the manufacturer, okay, so what metal is it? What is it made of? And they go, it's metal. They don't seem to understand that that is not a satisfactory explanation. Let me give you an illustration. If you go to a restaurant and you say, I would like the roast of the day. And they say, yes, we have meat. Is that an explanation about what you're going to get? You want to know what the roast is. It's a roast, sure, and sure it's going to be roast meat, but is it roast chicken? Is it roast pork? Is it roast lamb? Roast what? Roast beef? I don't know. They just keep saying, no, it's roast meat. Well, that's not good enough, is it? You could have an allergy to a certain meat and you'd never know with that description. So it's the same when they say in their description, oh, it's metal. That doesn't help. It's either aluminium, it's steel, it's stainless steel, it's cast iron, it's, I don't know, nickel-plated brass. You need to know what it is exactly. And you need to know if it's one piece or if it's multiple pieces put together and how it's structured. And I'm very disappointed that we don't get the decency of those sort of explanations when you're purchasing stuff online very often. You might rarely get them, but it's rare. So what I'm really suggesting here is we ask the question and keep asking till you get the right answer before you buy something. Because really, the last thing you want with your camera gear is kapow and it dropping to the ground because you bought a piece of crap, not because you wanted to buy cheap crap, because they didn't tell you it was cheap crap. So be aware. As a customer, beware. Don't be scared in asking the questions, guys. Make sure you get some good stuff and your camera gear is safe. So thank you. That's all I got for today. I hope you've enjoyed our little chat. Look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye-bye.